copy I brought was
Well,
wrong.
I put that in the
Not-
book. So
Where?
no, this is
No, this was handed to me this morning by Mr. Adams.
okay. Then that's the latest. Okay.
But you didn't put a copy in the book.
I did.
That's what I'm asking. Where's the one? Because it's kind of wrecked. That's all I'm saying.
Because I also have one, but it's not large print.
It's fine. I can read from this. But it's fine. It just it was kind of wrecked, and I thought if you had one in the book.
You're usually working on it. And you have your version, but I have one in my book.
Nice recovery.
You want to clear? Oh, good. You know what?
It's okay. I'm good. This is you know what? Because he did big print. 'cause he
Yes,
knew-
I know, and
I still put
I
on my
did
gloves.
slightly larger print, but not big enough. Yeah, I've got. Give to Neil. Okay. All right.
Hello, Neil. How are you?
I'm
Wanted to
good.
say
Good
hello.
to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congressman.
Yes,
It's good to see you
great
too.
to see you. Just wanted to renew my invitation to you for the seminar we're doing in Oak Ridge on the 29th and 30th of May. I've invited the leader,
Hey, that's terrific.
so it's going to be
Try to
getting
get out early on the 30th. It's my wedding night.
Oh, very important. Very important.
So good to see
Hello,
you.
Ann Harrington.
pleasure.
Nice to
I'm
see you.
fixing it. No, it's okay.
Well, there was one, we changed fuel to power, so I'm just gonna write power here.
I didn't have time this morning to do anything on this.
That's okay, I'm sorry you didn't get a bigger
No, it's
printed version.
okay.
You would have printed
Well,
out something
it's
for you.
Let me just go through it because there were a couple of word things.
That power change is the only change we've made since Adams and got it at like 11 o'clock this morning.
Okay.
Or maybe 10 o'clock this morning.
I just want to go through my statements.
What else do we need? No, I've got that tucked in my GAO section. Yeah, I'm the GAO ones for the, for when we come back. Right. We should probably do a 5-page and then.
This sort of stuff. Because you look good without having actually done it. Okay,
Hi,
that works
how are
for
you? Good to see you.
Hi, dear.
You're not Cynthia. Are you going to speak at all? Do you have a statement?
No, just
No,
Neil
it's just
and
I'm the
the
only
admiral.
one.
Yeah, the same way that
Right.
we did the defense programs.
Right.
So is this funny? After and I were both at Michigan at the same time doing graduate degrees.
No, seriously?
Seriously.
And by the
If
way,
I have a chance to talk to her, I will mention
she
it.
also, it's interesting, I've spent some time with her now. So I'll tell you, let me just, I
Yeah,
just
because
saw
you
some
told
word
me
problems.
that you really.
Yeah,
thought
yeah,
that
she's,
kind
we
of
did,
thing.
we did, she's very nice. And
potentially really repetitive, right? Here,
Because you wouldn't change it.
I mean, is it because this focuses on, and then
How do
this
you
paragraph? Well, because I keep saying it's gonna cause, the impacts will, the impacts will. Okay, well, I'm gonna change that.
Okay, that's fine.
Sounds different, okay. Okay,
Yeah,
that looks
their
fine.
DNA really.
That's fine.
Sorry, just to make sure you don't lose the actual word that's written. I don't think you would, but,
The actual word
Depends
that's
on
written.
well, it's
Seriously.
sever instead of severe.
I changed it already.
Okay, you got it.
There can be far worse spelling mistakes.
Yeah, it's here. I already changed it.
Right, right. Okay, yeah, okay.
Project management becomes sticky when we go. This breaks down all the projects. Remember when Ms. Glinski said,
Yes.
that breaks down by number. And then here's the
What's sticky?
if it does, the line of questions.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you said we have a sticky
No, if it
situation.
does get sticky. And then here are lists of our project management accomplishments, just so you have.
Okay, good.
In case we have any additional questions for you, we're gonna pass them out.
Should be starting now.
Right. We're not gonna give many answers, just questions.
That was the issue. Okay, I think we can pass that off the hook. Yeah, I think we can do that correctly.
Yeah.
At least at this point.
Good to see you,
Good to see you.
Mr. Chairman.
Hi, how are you?
Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman,
nice
nice
to see you.
to see
Thanks
you
for
again.
being here. You get your haircut since I saw you?
Good to see you, Ms. Capter. Thank you.
Hi, Ann. I looked at your bio, and you and I were both captives of the Horace H. Rackham School of Graduate Studies at the same time.
Isn't that funny? By the way, she's also wearing purple. Too funny.
Shades of purple.
Good afternoon. The hearing will come to order. We opened our hearing season a few weeks ago by examining what I consider to be the most critical responsibility of the Department of Energy, your programs to sustain our nuclear weapons stockpile. This afternoon, we'll explore the Department's two other major national defense program, nuclear nonproliferation and Naval Reactors. I'd like to welcome back the Honorable Neil Miller, Acting Administrator of NNSA, and Ms. Ann Harrington, Deputy Administrator. Thank you for being back with us again this year. And Admiral John Richardson, I'd like to welcome you to your first appearance before our subcommittee and express our support for you in your new position. The Director of Naval Reactors is an 8-year tour reflective of the time it takes to develop the expertise and leadership to be selected for the post. I think I speak for all of my colleagues up here when I say you have this committee's full support for your critical work. Before we begin again, I'd like to note that the administration is now nearly a month late in submitting its budget request for the fiscal year 2014. While we would all appreciate the input of the administration in the bills that we are charged to write, we will move forward, if necessary, without it. This lack of information becomes even more problematic when seen through the eyes of the continuing resolution and sequestration, which is projected to take effect this Friday. With no budget request, we are robbed of the input of thousands of professionals who have dedicated their lives to keeping our nation safe. Recent events have reminded us how challenging this work is. North Korea has triggered a third nuclear device. Iran, a close ally of the Syrian regime and international terrorist groups, continues to push forward on its enrichment activities unabated, and we must always be on our guard for criminal and terrorist groups searching for the material to build the ultimate weapon, a nuclear weapon. The nuclear nonproliferation programs of the Department have been developed to track and respond to these challenges, and this afternoon we'll discuss their effectiveness. Last year, the Department proposed a dramatic cut to the core nonproliferation program budget, which you have avoided thanks to the continuing resolution. Yet, as budgets get tighter, the costs of your major construction project, the MOX project, are getting higher and higher. I expect we'll hear today what the Department is doing to constrain the cost of this project so our nonproliferation programs do not suffer. Our nonproliferation programs are able to operate thanks to the strategic stability that our nuclear triad has provided for our country and our allies for over 60 years now. The programs of Naval Reactors support the most stealthy, enduring leg of the triad, our submarines. They also ensure that our aircraft carriers have the power to provide American air superiority where needed to keep the peace and to respond to trouble when it arises. Admiral, last year the Ohio-class replacement program was delayed by 2 years due to budget pressures, and this was before the threat of sequestration. Many of us have made it our priority to ensure that American security is not weakened as a result of further budget cuts, but I'm concerned that our operational readiness may be affected. I hope we can get your sense of how we will continue to meet such challenges. Once again, welcome to our witnesses, and I'll turn to my ranking member, Ms. Capter, for any comments that she may have.
Thank
Marcy?
you, Mr. Chairman, and they will be brief with courtesy to our guests today. Administrator Miller, thank you so very much. It's great to see you again. Ms. Harrington and Admiral Richardson, welcome. We are all looking forward to your testimony today on the important matters that deal with national security issues under your jurisdiction, and particularly I'm very interested to learn more about the impact of budget cuts on the programs under your purview. The threat of nuclear terrorism is one of the gravest national security threats that we face, and our nation must make real progress toward securing fissile material. Obtaining this material is the most difficult step in any plan, and there is reason to believe that known terrorist groups are interested in acquiring material that can be used in nuclear weapons. In April of 2009, President Obama committed to an aggressive non-proliferation agenda to secure all vulnerable nuclear materials worldwide in 4 years, an objective I wholeheartedly support. We all look forward to hearing about your progress toward that goal. Specifically, I would like to delve a bit during the questioning to the review of the second line of defense program and our relationship with Russia. Admiral, the Naval Reactors program is critical to the performance and continuation of what is the safest and most secure leg of our nation's nuclear triad. Naval Reactors has often been looked to for expert opinion and for management support to other government programs, and we are confident that you will continue this great service to our country. We look forward to your insights regarding recent changes in program schedules and costs, as well as more details on how this program has changed since last year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time.
Thank you, Marcy. Ms. Miller, welcome. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Capter, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. It's good to see you again this afternoon. I appreciated our time discussing the ways that NNSA has and is continuing to improve the way we're operating, our vision for the future, and the ongoing changes we've made to put us in a place to succeed, as well as to discuss our priorities moving forward. I'd also like to note, as you did, that today I'm testifying for the first time with Admiral John Richardson, who begins his first year of his 8-year term as Deputy Administrator for the Office of Naval Reactors. I was also honored to serve with his predecessor, Admiral Donald. Thank you all, and I look forward to answering your questions today about NNSA's Nonproliferation and Naval Reactors programs. As you know, almost 4 years ago in Prague, President Obama shared his vision for a world without nuclear weapons, free from the threat of nuclear terrorism and united in our approach toward shared nuclear security goals. And we've made great strides in securing vulnerable nuclear material across the globe, preventing the proliferation of dangerous nuclear material, and building a sustainable approach to nuclear security with our global partners. NNSA has removed all highly enriched uranium from 9 countries since the President gave his speech, and we will complete prioritized removal of vulnerable nuclear material from 4 more countries this year. I can confidently and proudly say that because of our work, it is much harder for a terrorist or smuggler to acquire nuclear material today than it was when the President came into office. However, we talked a couple weeks ago about the severe impacts sequestration would have on our weapons activities at the NNSA. The implications of sequestration on our nonproliferation and naval reactors programs are just as serious and would do permanent damage, we believe, to our national security. Even with reprogramming authority, which again we must have if sequestration were to become a reality, hundreds of nonproliferation jobs would be impacted. Impacts would be felt across NNSA sites in places like Tennessee, South Carolina, Texas, Missouri, California, and New Mexico, but also at places like Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in Washington, Argonne National Laboratory in Illinois, and Brookhaven National Laboratory in New York. Dozens of our private sector partners at small businesses and academic partners at universities across the country would also see a significant negative impact because of reductions to our nonproliferation efforts. I want to be very direct here. Sequestration will cause severe damage to our programs and our capabilities. In some cases, permanent damage. For example, at a time when North Korea and Iran are both working to advance their nuclear programs, and mere weeks, as you pointed out, Mr. Chairman, after North Korea conducted yet another nuclear test, sequestration will severely lessen our ability to detect nuclear detonations across the globe. A forced cut to our R&D nuclear detonation detection budget will cause NNSA to miss the delivery milestone of a crucial U.S. nuclear detonation detection satellite payload, and this satellite will be completed and launched without its intended nuclear detonation detection sensors. This will degrade the U.S. ability to monitor surface and above-ground nuclear detonations as required by law, but also as required by common sense. Once we launch that satellite, there is obviously no way to bring it down to attach a detection system and then relaunch it. The United States, with that satellite, only because of sequestration, will have lost some of its crucial nuclear detonation detection capabilities. Our Naval Reactors operation, which provides the power that ensures American sailors can reach ports across the globe, would also see serious impacts. Under sequestration, there will be approximately 400 contractor layoffs spread throughout facilities in New York, Pennsylvania, Idaho, Connecticut, and Virginia. In addition, the refueling overhaul of the Nuclear Navy's land-based training prototype in New York will be delayed, degrading the Nuclear Navy's ability to ensure adequate qualified sailors exist to operate both aircraft carrier and submarine fleets. Further, the construction of the new Naval Spent Fuel Handling Facility in Idaho will be delayed. I know many of you here today agree that sequestration is a dangerous proposition. As you heard from me recently, sequestration will impact both the economic and national security of this country, and I urge you and your colleagues to take prompt action to avoid the budget uncertainty of sequestration. It's in everyone's interest to do so. As we look to the future and see opportunity across the globe, Over the past 4 years, we've seen our international partners show focus, determination, and growth on our shared nuclear security goals. Russia, for example, has emerged with a new determination and an eye on full partnership with us, committed to keeping dangerous material out of the hands of proliferators and terrorists. After 20 years of work, we're moving toward the next phase in our relationship, where we work together as equals for the security of our peoples. The Russians are not alone, and dozens of countries have stood alongside President Obama and the United States at 2 nuclear security summits to show their commitment to our shared cause. I've recently had the honor of testifying before you, so I'll be brief this afternoon. But as I've said, we must continue to chart the path of nuclear security together, and avoiding sequestration would be one of the most important ways we could do that. Not doing so will do lasting harm to the cause of nuclear security in the United States and across the globe. I again thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Admiral Richardson. Good
Mr.
afternoon.
Chairman, Ranking Member Capter, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. And thank you, Administrator Miller, for your kind words. It is a privilege to be here today to represent the men and women of the Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program. And as has been pointed out, this is my first of hopefully many times testifying as the director, and I'm eager to share our progress, opportunities, and challenges. I'd like to begin by thanking the subcommittee for recognizing the people of Naval Reactors in your fiscal year 13 bill. Your words are an eloquent recognition that it's our people who have chosen to join the program and often spend their entire career at Naval Reactors in service to our nation that make all we do possible. This subcommittee has shown consistent, strong support for them, and I'm grateful. Today's Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program provides for research, development, design, procurement, certification, operation, and eventual disposal of the 96 naval nuclear reactors that power more than 40% of the U.S. Navy's major combatants, 10 aircraft carriers, 14 Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines, 4 guided missile submarines, and 54 attack submarines. These ships are available whenever called to go anywhere in the world and remain continuously on station in defense of our nation's interests. Today, the program is active across the entire cradle-to-grave life cycle. At the beginning of that cycle, we are designing the reactor plant for the submarine that will replace the Ohio-class sea-based strategic deterrent. Our SSBNs are the most survivable leg of the nation's strategic arsenal. Nuclear propulsion made this possible. Every minute for the last 53 years, our SSBN fleet has been on continuous patrol. For the last 31 years, that responsibility has been borne by those sailors operating the Ohio-class submarines. The first of these submarines is quickly approaching the end of its life and must be replaced. The procurement of the first Ohio replacement submarine is scheduled for 2021, with nuclear component procurement beginning in 2019. We are working to design the replacement for the Ohio class with a ship that meets requirements at the best possible cost. A centerpiece of our contribution to that effort is to provide a new reactor core that lasts for the entire life of the ship, running for over 40 years with twice as many operating hours than any core we have produced to date. This new life of ship core, together with other maintenance innovations, enables the new SSBN force to eliminate the midlife refueling and turn shipyard time into at-sea time. As well, by virtue of the increased operational time made available by this core, the new class of SSBN is able to meet its strategic requirements with 2 fewer ships. This translates to over $10 billion in acquisition savings and $30 billion in maintenance and personnel savings. Essential to delivering the life of ship core is refueling the land-based prototype reactor beginning in 2018. The core we use for this prototype will include special features that allow us to validate sophisticated manufacturing techniques and better understand the behavior of the core for the Ohio replacement. This will mitigate technical, cost, and schedule risks to the ship construction program and allow us to continue to train fleet operators. Our 58 years of experience in designing and building submarines tells us that the progress for these 2 related efforts, prototype refueling and Ohio replacement reactor plant design, must proceed briskly to achieve the goal of having the lead ship on its first strategic deterrent patrol on schedule in 2031. At the other end of the cradle-to-grave cycle, I am also responsible for managing our spent cores. My spent fuel handling infrastructure in Idaho is more than 50 years old and was not designed for processing and packaging of spent fuel. To ensure we can execute the Navy's refueling schedule for the Nimitz-class carriers, we are continuing with conceptual design of a new spent fuel handling project. This will come online in 2022 and replace the current expended core facility, which is becoming obsolete. The new facility will also enable me to meet my commitments to the state of Idaho under the 1995 settlement agreement, which requires that spent naval nuclear fuel be moved to dry storage and ultimately to permanent disposal. Having described the critical projects we have underway, I'd like to end where I began by describing the efforts of our people in our 2 labs working on 5 sites that form the base of our program. Were it not for these scientists and engineers, supported by funds provided through this subcommittee, I could not meet my responsibilities for safe and reliable operation of the nuclear-powered fleet. To keep ships at sea, it is common for our laboratory experts to be working with my headquarters team through weekends, overnight, and during holidays. They provide the technical foundation that is essential to execute both my regulatory and fleet support responsibilities. Mr. Chairman, I'm grateful for the support this subcommittee has given the Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program. I look forward to working together with the subcommittee to advance the 3 critical projects discussed today and to support the safe operation of the nuclear-powered fleet. Administrator Miller has discussed the impacts of sequestration on my program. I won't belabor those difficulties now. Suffice it to say, Naval Reactors will feel the significant and disruptive effects of sequestration throughout the program from cradle to grave. I respectfully ask for your continued support. Thank you again. I'm ready to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much. Ms. Capter and I and Mr. Coward and I serve on Defense Appropriations. And if we look like we're under siege, it's because we spent 2.5 hours across the way from all of you here. And we're acutely aware, and I think both members of both parties are concerned about the consequences of sequestration, and not only on your important work, which is really a major imperative, but across the whole spectrum, certainly in terms of national defense. And you're a key component of that, and we recognize that. I think we're acutely aware that we're not quite sure what's going to happen after Friday, but we're going to make sure that we do our level best to make sure that your task and your special responsibility is held as harmless as possible throughout the entire process.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to ask, Ms. Harrington, you don't have any comments, but I know you're extremely knowledgeable. You're ready to put your oar in the water here, but thank you for being here. I want to sort of talk a little bit about the non-Luger Cooperative Threat Reduction Agreement. That's been in force for 20 years, and I think most people in the room are familiar with the good work that agreement has been committed to. That umbrella agreement is with Russia is set to expire in June. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, and why is? Tell us why Russia is unwilling to sign that agreement, and or maybe they would be willing to sign it, but who's prepared to address the types of issues that they're concerned about?
Well, first of all, I think that, and Ann Harrington is going to speak a little bit more in depth about this. We actually are very encouraged at this point by the recent discussions that the State Department had with its counterparts in Russia on this subject. I think what we are seeing is that, and this is actually probably not a bad development, the Russians are insisting that at this point, 20 years after the end of the Cold War and many years into our cooperative work together, that they're ready to be full partners with us. Now, full partnership, for us is going to mean a full partnership. But I think from their perspective, it's important that they no longer be seen just as a recipient of U.S. aid when it comes to this area, and that this is something that they themselves, at this point, have taken into their own culture, whether it's protection of material or training of people or accountability systems. This is now something that after many years of working with us and having learned from us, they're prepared to carry out on their own or with us as a partner. You want to add to that?
Just very briefly, because I think Neil has
So,
touched the
so,
main
so it didn't
points.
come as a surprise.
Not at all.
Yeah, right.
Not at all. This was evolving, and as Neil said, we take this as actually a very positive and encouraging sign. Russia needs to step up and be a partner with us. We have started to talk about where the two countries, with our 20 years of experience under cooperative threat reduction, could in fact work together in third countries, perhaps even in countries that are going to be coming for the first time into the nuclear technology age, building nuclear power plants, who don't have an idea of what security is, who don't know how to build a security culture, who don't know how to do the things we have developed together as partners. So we take this as a very encouraging step. On the agreement itself, we actually began under State Department leadership, because this is a diplomatic initiative, to engage with Russia in June of 2012. There was just a very successful discussion in Moscow in the week of February 13th to open a dialogue on where to go. We play an active role, along with the Department of Defense and the Department of State, in these negotiations, and as they proceed, we'll be happy to keep the committee informed.
So did it come to you as a surprise?
No.
It did
No.
not come to you as a surprise?
No.
We've made a substantial financial commitment over the last 20 years. How much
Correct.
money have we been putting forward, and how much money have they put forward? And isn't one of the issues here that some of the money that they've agreed, they've made some pretty substantial commitments themselves, is that right?
They have, indeed. And as we interpret the discussions with the Russians, they intend to make more substantial contributions in the future, as Neil said, full partnership. Our concern here, and to be frank, is we have made considerable investments in Russia over the years, in equipment, in training, and in sustainability. We feel that it's necessary to continue to be engaged in these programs to ensure that the investments that we've made on behalf of our security and global security continue to function the way they were intended. So we do see a future role as we go through this transitional stage with Russia.
But a different sort of relationship.
Absolutely.
No,
Absolutely.
They still have to fulfill some of the financial. They've set aside money. Correct me if I'm wrong, but now they need to continue to work with us in terms of putting those whatever rubles towards.
Correct. We want to make sure that the systems that we have helped provide are in fact sustained and operational into the future.
So we believe that they, within their government, not surprisingly, they have something similar to ours. They have to get their budget through. And we are looking strongly now to make sure that the commitments that have been made in discussions with the United States government are carried all the way through and the funding is put in place.
Well, they have the financial wherewithal.
Depends on the price of oil. So.
Yeah. Well, they certainly have quite a lot of the
They
world's.
have a lot of financial wherewithal.
They have
That's right.
a lot of the world's oil supply.
Yes. And their budget is pegged, in fact, to the price of oil.
Do you anticipate that we will reach some sort of an agreement before the current framework, expires?
That is the goal.
So you have a pretty high degree of confidence.
We are encouraged, very much encouraged by the most recent negotiations. Yes.
All right, Ms. Capter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Could you give us, from what I'm hearing in your response in terms of Russia, is that it's largely a budget issue in terms of reaching an agreement. Am I hearing you correctly? Their budget.
It's not so much a budget issue as, and this has been fairly widely reported in the Russian press, that Russia is trying to reposition itself in the context of a number of agreements. So it is no longer seen as an assistance recipient. that it is now able to fully support its participation, whether it's in counter-narcotics or non-proliferation or whatever the topic. So this is happening not just in our context, but in many other places as well, where Russia has, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, been in this recipient relationship with other countries. But the fact that they are stepping up actively is indeed very encouraging.
And I think, you know, from our perspective, to be a full partner with us in Russia and in other countries, as we agree, when we agree to decide to go together in places, we would expect that they will have financial requirements as well.
Thank you. What does your expertise tell you about Iran and its nuclear capabilities?
We could certainly discuss any of the IAEA reports on Iran's capabilities. We know that they are capable of producing at least 20% enrichment uranium, or up to 20, I shouldn't say 20, up to 20%. We could go into much more detail with you in a classified setting.
All right. Let me ask you about detection of nuclear explosions. Do we have the capabilities to determine what type of device was detonated in North Korea, its explosive yield, and especially what fissile material fueled the explosion? These seem to be the questions that many people have. And then this committee appropriated $132 million last year to the NNSA for nuclear detonation detection. How do the technologies developed and produced by the NNSA's Nonproliferation Program assist us in answering these types of questions?
You wanna answer that?
So thank you for that question. The detection capabilities for a test like the North Korean one are both national technical means as well as data that we receive from the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty International Monitoring System. So we in fact get independent streams of data. We also get data from, in fact, the research community, which has a very active seismic network and has sensors of different kinds distributed around the world. We fund the development of technical approaches that are utilized by other parts of the U.S. government to collect and analyze information. So we are a test bed. We are the development, the R&D arm for other agencies. Again, if we want to go into specific details about which agencies use our capabilities, we would have to be in a classified setting. In particular, we have developed improvements in yield estimation, location, and speed of radionuclide analysis. And these are all deployed by the Department of Defense. Information about the nature of the fissile material in the North Korean device would probably only be possible if certain radionuclide byproducts of the test were collected. They would have to escape to the environment. We know from the 2009 test, for example, we were not able to detect those radionuclides. We did in 2006. There is still analysis ongoing to see if any of those signals can be detected. But it is very dependent on how the North Koreans designed their test, and we know from 2009 they were able to design a test that was that escaped some of our detection capabilities.
But just to amplify what Ann was saying about what our role is with this, the agencies Ann referred to obliquely tell us the kind of capability they believe they need, and we fund the work, we do the work that provides that capability to the best of the ability of people who are developing things right now.
Well, that was one of the add-on questions. Do we need to make more investments in alternate types of detection technologies? And if so, where should we concentrate for the next phase of research and development?
Well, we are always trying to stay ahead of those who are trying to evade the detection capabilities that we have. We've always looked at trying to keep a balanced portfolio of space-based, seismic, radionuclide, infrasound, hydroacoustic, and other means of detection, to explore technologies to see if they can add to our understanding of these events. So that is part of an ongoing process. And as well, to work not only with our domestic partners, but also to work with the international community to see not only what we can develop, but where we can place technologies in order to get better fidelity.
Thank you very much. And could I finally just ask very briefly, in terms of working relationships with Pakistan, Administrator Miller, you went through a lot of countries. Some were mentioned, some were not. Is that relationship transparent?
It's a transparent relationship. The United States government has open relations with the government of Pakistan.
We engage in a variety of programs
Right.
with Pakistan. We have a Megaports project there. We do second line of defense. We do export control training. We support International Atomic Energy Agency activities to secure radioactive sources there. We are optimistic that the IAEA will also be able to expand that program to physical security of their nuclear power reactors sometime in the not too distant future. So we do have as active a program as we can with Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
thank you, Ms. Kaptur. Mr. Alexander.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Miller, you touched slightly on some of the President's remarks as they dealt with Russia at the press conference they had over there with the Russian President. Our President said to prevent terrorists from acquiring nuclear weapons, we came together at our National Security Summit, where our two nations made numerous commitments, including agreeing to eliminate enough plutonium for about 17,000 nuclear weapons. Central to this commitment is the completion of the MOX facility in South Carolina a reality, or what happens if it falls through? What do we do with the waste? How do we convert it?
So the United States government remains completely committed to the agreement that we signed with Russia for the disposition of that excess weapons plutonium. As far as the project itself is concerned, we continue to manage that. The President's budget fully funded the requirements for that construction project, and the NNSA continues to manage it as an ongoing project. That is the project of record right now.
Okay, so the President's commitment to that project and the new budget won't reflect
And
a
unfortunately,
dilution of that commitment?
yeah, unfortunately, I'm not able to talk in any way, shape, or form about a budget that is not up here. I apologize for that, but that is the state of the budget situation right now.
Well, that's the bind that we find ourselves
I know.
in too, you know.
I know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Calvert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. China continues to modernize and expand its nuclear stockpile, and obviously it's now on the cusp of obtaining a triad land-based intercontinental ballistic system. They can both launch on missiles, submarine launch ballistic missiles, and airdrop nuclear bombs. Meanwhile, China remains outside the major arms limitation and control conventions, such as the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty and the Intermediate Range Nuclear Force Treaty. And while as the United States continues to talk about reducing its stockpile, and the Soviets or Russians continue to talk about reducing their stockpile down to what, approximately 1,500 weapons, the Chinese allegedly have exceeded 1,500 weapons. We don't know for sure because they don't let us know. What is the U.S. doing to counter China's modernization program, either with our own stockpile or through diplomatic channels to bring China into the fold of nuclear arms reduction?
I appreciate the question, Mr. Calvert. I'm going to leave the weapons discussion from the United States weapons side to the side for the moment, because I think that's going to take a fuller discussion, and probably one that has to take place in a classified setting. With respect to China in the nuclear security regime worldwide, and with the United States engagement with China in that regime, I would start by telling you that since 1998, we have been in cooperation with China on the peaceful uses of nuclear technology. We've had an agreement with them since then, and we have ongoing technical cooperation with them on proliferation and nuclear security. This is best practices. This is how to best regulate, how to best secure nuclear facilities. So that's been ongoing. We see China as absolutely essential as a member of the nuclear security community. We have active and ongoing engagement with China, we in the NNSA. I'll ask Ann to speak a little bit further about the specifics of that. But again, we see them as an important member of the P5. They are a nuclear weapons state, as you point out, and therefore for us an absolutely essential member to engage on nuclear security issues. We believe that by engaging and sharing best practices and working with them is the best way to maintain that transparency that we seek.
Well, in that sense, what's your view of China's non-proliferation record? Do they have a good record?
Go ahead.
Well, there are cases, as I'm sure you are aware, of either Chinese companies or Chinese individuals being sanctioned by the United States for exports that we do not feel are appropriate or that could contribute to a weapons program in another country. But working with the government of China and working with our partners in China, which go all the way from Customs Service to the Chinese Atomic Energy Agency, we have found that they are serious about their mission, as we are. They are professional in their approach. They are eager to learn, and not just learn, but then apply. We have our largest megaports project in Shanghai, which is appropriate given the amount of export from China to the United States.
But in regards, excuse me, in regards to proliferation, their next door neighbor doesn't seem to be doing too well.
Well,
is China involved in any way? And you know, I read with amusement some of the news stories about their horror and shock when yet again Korea tested another nuclear device. Was that truly horror and shock, or was that that they had no foreknowledge at all that this was going to happen?
Well, I think all of us who watch North Korea were expecting something to happen, and I imagine
Except China didn't, because all the news reports said that they were absolutely shocked and surprised that North Korea had yet again tested another device. Do you believe that?
I don't think I'm in a position to actually judge what the Chinese said was believable or
But you
not.
weren't shocked and surprised.
I was not, no.
So would you be shocked and surprised if the Chinese were shocked and surprised?
I am shocked and surprised at your questions. But China is like the United States. Its government has many different components. And so we have been, I think, quite successful in engaging the components that are most important to our particular mission and to engage them in a positive manner. And I think that is what is critical at this stage. You have to build on those things. And it's quite interesting in the Nuclear Security Summit process. China is actually one of those countries that not only has offered certain initiatives, but is stepping up to fulfill them, including working with us on eliminating and converting reactors using highly enriched uranium that they originally provided to countries like Syria, Pakistan, Iran, Ghana, Nigeria. So they're actually working with us on what we think are some of those crucial issues of how do you get that material out of circulation and away from the hands of terrorists.
I find it interesting, though, that as the Chinese become more provocative and demonstrating their nuclear triad and their ability to move nuclear weapons in various ways, what's that going to do for instance Japan? Is Japan the next country to proliferate, you believe, if they haven't already? Do you think that in effect China is pushing them to a position in which they may believe that they, in order for their own defense, need to move toward having their own nuclear arsenal?
Well, I would argue that that's one of the reasons why we need to keep our stockpile strong, our Navy strong, is to provide that umbrella to countries
that
like
deterrent.
Japan.
And we continue to reduce that deterrent. The stockpile is getting older. We haven't moved toward modernizing that stockpile.
Well, actually, we have moved toward modernizing
Not
the
nearly
stockpile.
not nearly as quick as the Russians, as I understand it.
As you know, the program to continue to extend the life of the W-76, what we have the warhead that we have the most of in our stockpile, is proceeding. We have now programs proceeding for other weapons in the stockpile to extend the life of. So I would argue we're actually doing quite a bit. The fact of numbers in the stockpile being reduced is probably not the best judge of how effective the stockpile is. We have certain weapons in that stockpile that are quite old that we don't have plans to use. And we, as we all know, are trying very hard to work with the resources we have to free up money to plow back into the things we need to do. So maintaining warheads that we don't have an intention of deploying because we haven't kept up, with good reason, for the platforms because we have changed our strategy, argues for us to take funds otherwise used to maintain certain things and plow it into extending the life of the things that we absolutely must have in that stockpile and must know will be workable.
So are you saying we're doing a better job of maintaining our domestic nuclear industrial base?
Our domestic nuclear industrial base, I don't know if you're asking me about the
About
power
how
base
the
or
condition
what
at
you're asking me
Hartford,
Well,
conditions at our facilities in Lawrence Livermore and New Mexico.
I think it's important I think all of those things are important. It's important to have a warhead that is safe, secure, and reliable. I think it's important to have an infrastructure that will support it, and that infrastructure includes not only physical infrastructure, but human infrastructure as well. So all of
And
those things
we're
are
doing a
need,
good job in both.
We need to go to Mr. Fleischman here
Okay.
in a second. We'll get back to you.
All right. I apologize, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cowart. Mr. Fleischman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Administrator, I just have one question. It's my understanding that both the Advanced Test Reactor in Idaho and the high flux isotope reactor at Oak Ridge both share the same fuel source, which they procure from B&W in Lynchburg. These reactors, I think, are the only customers for B&W's fuel. It is also my understanding that should Heifer be shut down, that fuel costs at ATR will be increased by approximately $9 million due to fixed overhead costs. Will these repercussions be considered when funding decisions are being made?
you wanna go ahead.
Okay, so the complication here is that the Advanced Test Reactor in Idaho actually is a facility of the DOE Nuclear Energy Office, and Heifer in Oak Ridge belongs to the Office of Science. So neither one of those is directly our responsibility, but we certainly could take the question back and see if we can get you an answer on that.
Thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Simpson. Thank you, Mr. Fleischman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that, Admiral Richardson, could you tell me, or at least provide for the committee, for the record, how much funding the program at the ATR has received from Naval Reactors over the last 5 years? And can you also give us an assessment if those contributions have kept up with the cost of operating the reactor? for
Yes,
the
sir.
record.
Yes, sir, I will.
You mentioned that sequestration will affect your ability to proceed with the pool and handling facility that you're talking about building out at the site. What will sequestration do in terms of delaying that facility, and what does that do to the schedule of refueling Navy ships?
Yes, sir. So I think the best way to understand that is to understand that facility's role in the state of Idaho and also in the product line to handle spent fuel from our carriers. And so the beginning with the Enterprise and then for the next 8 years, our nuclear powered carriers will be coming in on a heel-to-toe basis that will for refueling. And
How long does it take to refuel one of those?
it's about 2 years
About
for the
2 years.
refueling, sir. And so as they proceed through that process, that spent core is removed from the ship there in Norfolk and then transported in a container up to the facility in Idaho. The current facility, the expended core facility, is not optimized to handle the production rate that this pace of refuelings is going to require. That facility, as you know, sir, is over 50 years old now. It was originally built really as a research and development type of a facility, not really as a production line to move spent cores through the facility and into dry storage. Sequestration, the program then, as a strategic decision, put together a plan to replace this expended core facility with a new spent fuel handling project that would meet the requirements of the pace of refuelings and also meet the requirements to the state of Idaho for the 1995 agreement and allow us to be more responsible with respect to meeting environmental compliance. The program is at sort of the conceptual phase of the plan right now, moving towards critical decision 1 later on in this year, a very important milestone. Additionally, we are starting to ramp up our staffing to support getting into the more active parts of that program, including some contractual commitments that are in jeopardy. And so all of those, I think, are vulnerable should sequestration come into effect. This will cause the program to be delayed again and also eventually cost more. One of the more immediate costs there is that since the carriers are going to come in for refueling, those cores are going to come off to support fleet needs. And for every year that the spent fuel handling project moves to the right, requires us to buy additional interim storage containers to handle that fuel until that facility is eventually rebuilt. Does not mitigate in any way the need to build that facility. And those are, is about $100 million a year of sunk cost just to store that fuel until the facility is rebuilt.
You mentioned that the strategy for dealing with the used nuclear fuel and the Idaho governor's agreement that requires all the spent nuclear fuel from the Navy to be out of Idaho by 2035. The new plan from the administration is they wouldn't develop a permanent repository till 2048, so we're already 13 years behind, even if it were to stay on plan. How do you plan to deal with that? Have you started or thought about negotiations with the state of Idaho to re-examine the governor's agreement and the 2035 date, especially since Yucca Mountain seems to be on a simmer?
Right, yes, sir. So one of my very first priorities was to go out to Idaho, and I did get a chance to meet with the governor. We addressed this, this fact, really, and agreed that as this moves forward, as this issue moves forward, we'll continue to stay in very close communication. Our facility manages that fuel in a very responsible manner right now, so it is stable in its current condition, and we are ready whenever an eventual permanent repository is ready to move that fuel to that repository.
Okay, thank you. I'll wait for the next round.
Mr. Nunley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation Program has traditionally carried some pretty large balances from year to year. And we've asked you to look into that. You've done it. You included some information in your semi-annual report. Tell me, what have you done? What actions have you taken to get to the level of where you are now?
So thank you for that question. It's one that we've been working on very hard, as you know, for some time. The way we program and the way we budget and the way we report unencumbered balances is based on uncommitted and unobligated. No. Yes. So we look at what is both obligated and committed because the way we have to run our contracts both need to be part of the calculation. For example, when we have to, say, get a replacement core for a reactor that we're converting from highly enriched uranium to low enriched uranium, we need to contract up front for that reactor core. It may take some time for that core to be built. And then it may take additional time for transportation and for the installation, the removal of material. It's a complex set of contracts, all of which need to be in place and all of which have to have funding placed against them. Getting HEU out of countries, de-inventorying countries of their entire stockpile of HEU is extremely important, and we do not leave at risk not being able to execute those actions within a budget. And so whereas some might only look at what's unobligated, we look at what is obligated and committed as being the total of what is unavailable, and then unobligated is what's left out of that.
So the way the budget system works, you have a contract in place against which you obligate dollars.
Mm-hmm.
But you may have a plan of program, as Ann was saying, where you don't have every contract in place because you have to have one part done before the next part done before. But you, in your program, have committed those dollars, which is why you come back to the Congress asking for additional dollars for something else, even if on the books it looks like the dollars are not committed.
Right.
This is different than the typical Department of Energy program where we are simply contracting with a management and operating partner, a laboratory, or that kind of thing, where we are able to obligate most of our money right up front and say, we're going to spend pretty much all of it there or with a subcontractor. So right away it goes to the other side of the books and looks like the money is obligated.
Right.
It's different in this type of program.
For example, last year, we reached the end of the year with only 9% unobligated, which is a bare minimum for making the transition from one fiscal year to the next. So we feel that we've gotten very tight control of this. Plus, part of our management philosophy here is we don't release final payments on contracts until we are sure that what we've contracted for is in fact going to be delivered. And we feel that's responsible to the taxpayer. So we do keep a quite tight management hand on our money until we're completely satisfied.
All right, so I think you probably answered my follow-up question. I just want to make sure I understand. Now that you've had some success at being proactive at reducing these balances, you think about 9% is the right amount?
We could get into a long discussion about the impact of continuing resolutions on program execution.
That's right.
And very seriously, 9% is dangerous when you're in a CR situation.
I don't think you'll get any disagreement from any member of this committee, Democrat or Republican, that we need to get to regular order. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Judge Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. DOE and DHS cooperate in scanning U.S.-bound maritime cargo. Got several questions. What is the current status of that cooperative effort with regard to both U.S.-bound cargo and other international cargo, such as that screened through DOE Megaports program? It appears that 100% scanning of mandatory cargo won't be ours anytime soon. What are DOE and DHS doing to collect and share information about high-risk shipments, and what steps are being taken to ensure the U.S. and its foreign partners have the capability to scan cargo to meet the continuing threats of radiological and nuclear materials being shipped in commercial shipping.
Thank you for your question. We work very closely, not only with the Department of Homeland Security, but with the Department of State, the Department of Defense, the Justice Department, and others in the context of the Interagency Policy Committee, the IPC, that deals with global nuclear detection architecture and counterterrorism. So this past year, when we did the review of our second line of defense program, which includes megaports, what we did is work with DHS and with our interagency partners to really scrub the point of diminishing returns in the megaports architecture. So what we did was look with our interagency partners at how could we determine the most, to design a program to get the most bang for our buck, and to really address the ports and transit locations that most affect incoming freight to the United States. And so that is now how we are designing our program. You're right, 100% is probably several tens of percents farther than we will ever be able to achieve. But based on our new analysis, we feel that we're getting at the places that are most important.
One of the problems that arises in ports where cargo is transshipped between vessels and moved directly to rail, locations that make it difficult to use existing radiation portal monitors. What is NNSA doing, working with DHS, CBP, DNDO, to close this security gap?
You've identified one of the real challenges to this kind of security program. As part of the second line of defense review, one of the things that we looked at was what are new technologies that are coming along? What are other types of technologies? For example, mobile units that can be driven around a port location or around connecting rail location, mobile units, handheld units, things that you could put in a backpack, while you're walking around. There are a variety of other technologies that may come onto the market in future years that would be worth reviewing, some of which we're of course supporting through our R&D program. So this is an area that we know is one of our biggest challenges, the transshipment element, and even though it is extremely technically challenging, we continue to pursue it.
Well, one of the things that concerns me, I went over with Chairman Rogers and I don't know who all. We looked at the European ports. They proudly showed us their ports they were running through. They didn't particularly like the idea. They were doing it for our safety, but we paid them money, so they liked it. But then I discovered that this really is not, from what I can see, effectively being done worldwide. We can't stop ships offshore. The Admiral will tell you that. If we do that, we'll never have commerce in the country.
Right.
We've got to solve this problem because this was like one of the top priority problems when we started this agency. We started DHS, and not your agency, but DHS, and it's got to happen. Or one of these days, the Big Bang Theory is going to be ours.
Well,
It's going to be a Big Bang.
Yeah, we do have a technical partnership between us, DNDO, the intelligence community, and the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, so that we're all trying to put our technical expertise together to try to solve some of these problems. They're not easy, and not inexpensive either.
Lots of stuff is not easy, but the consequences of something in your field are bigger than anything we got.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And if it happens, buck stops on your table and others. and doing ours.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No ports,
No,
th-
this is
no
serious
ports
stuff.
there.
You're talking about
Yes.
nuclear stuff. And I keep, it seems to me, and I listened when I was in Europe, I listened here, and everybody says, we'll get the technology. I don't know what it takes to build a fire and folks to get the technology, but we gotta get it. Because consequences are more dire than anything we got. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Admiral, we anticipate at some point the President will be announcing perhaps some further reductions in our nuclear weapons stockpile. Certainly there's been a lot of back and forth and some speculation, and we obviously don't have any information, but certainly people with a lot of information sort of out there on the street. Correct me if I'm wrong, the Department of Defense has recently completed, I think it was last year, the Nuclear Posture Review implementation study and looked at many scenarios. With a reduction, how does that affect force structure, the area, where you have the greatest expertise? But we have a remarkable
Right.
fleet of submarines. And
Yes, sir. So the analysis that's been done, the excursion analysis, really, since there are no final decision, has done nothing but confirm or validate the importance of the sea-based leg of our strategic deterrent triad as the most survivable and most responsive leg for the nation's strategic defense. We see that under many of those excursions, while the overall numbers of warheads may be coming down, there would be a shift that such that a greater percent of those warheads would be carried on nuclear submarines. And so we see that the responsibility of that leg of the strategic triad remains critical to the nation's defense. And with respect to force structure.
so with less nuclear weapons, let's say down to 1,000, you say it wouldn't have a major effect on the Navy's force structure?
We wouldn't see that right now, sir. There is an element of the survivability nature of that leg of the triad that is not completely linear with respect to the number of weapons, and so there is a number of a force structure and a number of required submarines at sea that are required to just maintain that part of the triad viable and survivable, which is really its unique contribution to the nation's strategic
So we
triad.
recognize the unique contribution.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
just wondering, if there are further reductions, is there, does that change your plans for the Ohio replacement?
There's currently no plans to change the Ohio replacement program.
Might change the configuration, I would assume.
Right now, the configuration and the force structure are both would remain on track with the current plan.
So the timetable now on track is still a delay. Do you
With the
anticipate?
original 2-year delay,
Do
yes,
you
sir.
anticipate more under, this sort of sequester situation?
Sir, in a sequester situation,
We're on your side. I'm just wondering
yes, sir.
whether we're going to wake up
Absolutely.
someday and we're going to find this program, which we need.
Right,
We need these replacements,
right. The
put out a
consequence-
few more years.
Yes, sir. The consequences of a sequestration would require really a strategic review of the nation's strategic posture. And within that review, I think it's impossible to guarantee that any program could be completely protected. And so while the CNO, as you know, sir, has made this his #1 acquisition priority, and we would do everything we could to mitigate any effects on this program, it's impossible to guarantee that under sequestration.
Yeah, he made it that clear across the way here
Yes, sir.
an hour or so ago.
Yes, sir.
Well, keep us posted.
Yes, sir, we will.
All right. Ms. Captor, or Mr. Visklowski, are you ready? You want Ms. Captor's going to bat warm-up here for you. I know you're loaded, right, Mr. Wisniewski?
Thank you. Administrator Miller, in terms of the second line of defense, your agency has completed its review, and could you tell our members the results of your inward assessment and the future of that program? What have you learned?
So I'll just say to open, I'm going to ask Ann to speak specifically to it because she was a member of the interagency group that conducted the review. Overall, the support for second line of defense for the activities is strong in the interagency, and we expect that to go forward as a strong program, as a strong component of our overall efforts to detect and contain material worldwide. What the review, I think I would say, gave us was a sense of the best way to go forward, given where we are right now. After years of work in this area, what's the best way now to go forward? What do we actually have to do right now? I'm going to speak further to that, Ann.
Right, and I got to some of that response when Mr. Carter asked about the detection out of ports. But yes, the SLD review, I would have to say we're very pleased with the outcome of that review. You know, as Neil is fond of saying, in a couple of years we're going to be 15 years old, and any kind of responsible program management takes a step back periodically, looks at the programs, reevaluates, reassesses, reprioritizes, and looks at where those programs fit in the broader context of what we're doing both within the United States and with partners around the world. And so that's exactly what we did during this deep dive on this program. So one of our important partners, of course, is DNDO within the Department of Homeland Security. So we collaborate routinely with our interagency partners on equipment assessments and developing technical standards and threat assessments and sharing test results. We intensified all of that discussion during this past year. And we also, as I mentioned, took a look at what other technologies were available. We took a look at risk profiles, even the geology of different risk areas where there's a lot of trafficking or suspected trafficking of materials, and did an analysis to see what fit best where in terms of its expected performance and you know, its detection capabilities. As we were undergoing our own review, the White House in the sub-IPC that was looking at global nuclear detection architecture was undertaking a review as well. And so the two reviews got merged. And the result was a very nice selection of areas where our programs could fill specific capabilities and gaps within a broader interagency program. So now we go forward into, you know, a new phase of the program where we're using a different mix of technologies. We've reprioritized within the whole interagency spectrum and have a very clear role to play now in a larger effort. So I think overall we're quite satisfied with how the review came out.
I would just add to what Ann said about the value of looking at these programs so many years into them and understanding at this point, as we discussed earlier about Russia, where countries are now mature in their, either in their own capabilities and therefore their ability to step up and be more of an actual partner with us as opposed to an assistance recipient, as well as their interest and willingness to either go out themselves with us and help us do these things in other countries, or provide us the funding to be able to do it. And we have a very good program to accept funding from countries that might not on their own be able to do this effort without the United States government in a third country, but want to help the cause.
If material has been found as a result of these efforts or scanners, is that generally reported? I mean, is that the sort of thing you might just pick up in the press in some country?
Hopefully not.
No.
Or is it
Yeah, the sharing of that kind of information is usually done on a very confidential basis. Now, sometimes things will hit the press that have come through our detection systems. There was, I think, sometime last year or the year before, brushed steel tissue box covers that were radioactive because they had picked up scrap metal, and the scrap metal had a radioactive source mixed into it, and then they manufactured it. It got put into a container and shipped toward the United States and got stopped because it hit one of these transit ports where our alarms went off, and we were able to get a team on the ground and ascertain which part of the shipment was radioactive, and then it goes back to the country of origin for disposition. So those kinds of things we do hear about, and those get into the open press. The more sensitive information, though, is usually handled through intelligence channels.
In terms of the actual for radiation scanner detectors, do you have a way of verifying what's actually going on in a host country, or do we just listen to the host country?
We offer a service center that works with all of our detection installations. So each country where we have detectors installed, there is a local service provider, and we get information from those systems through that on a very regular basis, and that allows us to make sure that the equipment remains calibrated. It lets us identify when something is malfunctioning. So we actually have quite an extensive view into the performance parameters of the actual equipment.
And finally, let me just ask on this round, Admiral Richardson, as you look to the future, with everything you know about nuclear power, if Idaho isn't comfortable at the moment with additional expansions down the road, even though you're in discussions with them, and Yucca Mountain doesn't want the commercial spent fuel, what do we do as a country in order to either reduce the amount, which efforts at scientific inquiry to try to reprocess this? Where's the best research being done on that? As you look to the future, 50 years from now, where are we going to be? Delaying, as the chairman said, or one of the members said, delay another 18 years or 25 years. It seems like we don't have a good answer here.
Ma'am, I'm certainly not the most qualified person at this table to talk about that. I will say that, our commitment, as always, has been that as this situation evolves and hopefully matures towards a responsible final depository, all along the way, we'll remain committed to the people, not only of Idaho, but the United States and the environment, so that we can move through this dynamic process in a very responsible way, maintaining safe and responsible production of these spent cores throughout, and remain ready to move out to any final answer that we come to.
But could I ask any panelists, based on where research is being done in our country or elsewhere right now, where do you see the scientific horizon moving in order to help us to minimize the amount of material that's left over afterwards, or magically neuter it, all right? And where's that research being done?
So I will just say straight out, I think there's a bit of discomfort here on our side because we know we have colleagues who are far better placed to answer your question, Ms. Capter. But I will tell you that there is important work going on, but it's going on in a lot of places. This has been the holy grail of people who deal with nuclear from the beginning. And over the last years, and I've been around the waste program since the 80s myself, and it has always been the thing that people have been most interested in is, how do you take this? And I think it's been one of those things that's been just close enough that people believe we're going to get there. And so I know that's somewhat similar to what we said about detection, but it's actually connected. And I think there's quite a lot of good work both going on and planned. unfortunately, it's going to be another one of those things that hits people in the face about from the perspective of funding. So I would, at that point, defer to my colleague, Assistant Secretary Pete Lyons, to be the best source of information on that.
We
Thank
can
you,
get,
Mr.
we
Chairman.
can, we can get you together with Pete Lyons.
Yeah,
Yes.
hey, I studied this in
Yes.
physics. This was so many years ago. You know, I thought, here I am at this point, and we still don't
Well, we
have
haven't
the
solved
other
that one
end of
yet.
this chain reaction. You know,
But
we
this
don't,
is-
we can't neuter the thing.
But your question is a great demonstration of why it is so important not to view it as a naval reactors problem or a nonproliferation problem or a utilities problem. It is our
Scientific.
problem. And we work, in fact, very closely with Pete Lyons in the Office of Nuclear Energy on a whole suite of studies and other activities, and I'm sure he'd be very happy to come up and visit with you.
Thank you, Ms. Capter. Mr. Visklowski,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apologize to the.
you went and got lunch, right? Is that
No,
what-
sir, no.
You didn't,
no,
no
sir.
lunch?
Lunch is in back of me. As soon as I'm done.
Got it.
I'm hitting one of the donuts.
All right.
I'm done like that. I do apologize for being here late. It's not lack of interest, it was just tied up. A couple of things. One, I understand that the chairman has already addressed in the questions, and you probably have in your testimony, the issue of the Nunn-Lugar program.
Yes.
And despite the fact that someone I have a profound respect for, Senator Lugar is no longer in Congress, Senator Nunn is not, would also want to emphasize, have a strong empathy for that program. Think it has been wonderful. And deeply supportive, and understand we have problems with the host country, but whatever we can do, certainly would want to be supportive of that program.
Thank you.
Also understand that Mr. Alexander has broached the issue of MOX and the plutonium feedstock. It is no secret that when Mr. Hobson chaired the subcommittee, he and I were opposed to MOX in the first instance. It exists, and so my concern now is that it is managed as efficiently and cost-effectively as possible. And again, understand that has been covered, but would be remiss if I didn't emphasize that.
Appreciate that.
The one question I do
It's been,
have.
it's been somewhat covered, I think that.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add my voice. Just one question, Admiral Richardson, and that's on industrial base. Earlier this morning, we had the Joint Chiefs upstairs, and Admiral Greenert mentioned that as an example, talking about the impact on industrial base with continuing resolution, sequestration, that his testimony said that approximately 90% of our nuclear components come from sole source suppliers. Would you want to discuss that and concerns that gives you as far as the industrial base and the issue of cost and competition?
Yes, sir. That's a true statement. The nature of the work, the magnitude and complexity of the work, and the capital investment required to do this sort of work naturally narrows that market down to a very, very few contenders. And we have had a relationship since the very beginning of the program with our suppliers, many of which are sole source suppliers. We manage that very, very carefully in terms of continuing to work with them to provide the most cost-effective solutions in those things. We use as much flexibility as is permitted to look for opportunities in the market to buy at the right price points and to level the market to get the most efficient use of those facilities. We work very closely in terms of inspections and oversight to make sure that those components from our sole source suppliers remain competitive. But it is just the nature of the business, sir, that there's just not a lot of competition out there. Yes, sir.
Admiral, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Simpson?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I can tell you, Ms. Capter, where a lot of that work is done on fuel cycles in Idaho. And we'd invite you out to look at what they're doing and trying to address those concerns that you just raised. Very important work that's being done out there under the Office of Nuclear Energy, headed by Mr. Lyons. Couple of questions, just a quick one. When we talk about megaports, are we having any problems in those countries that have been involved in the Arab Spring or whatever I'm thinking of Alexandria and Egypt and stuff. How's the relationship going there in terms of the megaports that we're operating in those countries?
As far as I'm aware, the relationship is still fine, but in general, our work in a number of countries in the Middle East is challenged because of the current instability there. So State Department is cautious about granting clearance to travel to a number of countries, but we continue to look at ways to both support and expand activities. Obviously, if you look at the situation in Syria, this is another place where we will be expected to contribute in any post-evolution environment that evolves there.
And the tough thing is, it's easy for us to say we need to import, or we need to inspect every cargo container that comes into this country until you go out and look at it. And it's, you want to bring industry and commerce to a standstill. That would do it for sure. Ms. Harrington, I want to thank you for coming to Idaho, and I'd invite you back to come actually in like July, August, September. You have a whole different opinion of Idaho.
Idaho,
yeah, and we can do some
Idaho
fishing
in the winter is beautiful. It's very nice.
As long as you're inside. In light of the recent press stories about large-scale cyber hacking attacks, can you tell me about your plans for including cyber security protections into your non-proliferation programs, and how the INL's capabilities might contribute to that effort?
Excellent question. Cybersecurity has become probably one of the most raised topics in our non-proliferation discussions with our colleagues. I think that countries around the world are really beginning to appreciate the full scope of threat that cyber attacks represent. So we are looking at ways to incorporate that. We have a CIO in NNSA who, of course, is looking at that on our own behalf, but also can inform us about what we can discuss. It's a very challenging topic to raise with international partners without getting into areas that reveal your own defenses and so forth. So it's an area that we have to approach with caution. But on the other hand, we also want countries and private companies within those countries that are part of their nuclear structure to be very aware of what the threat is, to not be too cavalier about what can prevent the threat. I was, in fact, very impressed with the work that is going on in Idaho, and as you know, we work very closely with your team there, and I think I managed to tap into some of their expertise for some upcoming consultations with one of our European friends so that we could share some of those insights and the expertise that you have there. So thank you.
Well, along the same lines, Administrator Miller, there's language in the recently enacted Defense Authorization Bill requiring a study of the multi-agency governance model for national security laboratories. There's a fear among some that this effort could disadvantage any non-weapons labs from doing work for DOD and DHS and the intelligence community. Can you comment on this provision and assure us that whatever we do, any effort wouldn't hinder the agency's ability to work across all of the labs for the DOE National Complex?
Yeah, Mr. Simpson, I'm happy to respond to that. I would be hesitant to comment on the legislation because I was not the author of the legislation, and without passing any judgment about intention or the result of it, I would say that from our perspective, and here I would speak for on behalf of the executive branch, we don't see either that legislation posing a barrier to the kind of work we do on a regular basis, which is to work where the best work is and work with whatever lab is the best place to work. And
that's all I would ask you to do, actually. I mean, it is because there's always been this little bit of competition, and competition is not a bad thing, between weapons labs and the other labs and stuff. And All we ask you to do is to look at where the best work is going on and use it, and use our complex. I mean, it is a wonderful DOE complex we have of our national laboratories, and we need to use them to their full capabilities. But let me just say, I thank all of you for the work you do. It's very important work, and I know you're doing a great job, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Simpson, Judge Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. NNSA with DNDO has been deploying its aerial measuring system to establish radiological background signatures in urban areas and areas of contamination, or to potentially detect lost radioactive sources, for example, to prevent the risk of material being used as a dirty bomb. What's the status of this effort, and what plans does NNSA and DNDO have to expand it in the United States?
Well, we don't do any surveillance of activity here with our planes, so.
You're sharing the data though, right?
We do have an ongoing cooperation with DNDO, but none of the NNSA assets are used to surveil places in this country unless it's in the event of an emergency that has not occurred. So we have assets that we can deploy, but we're not planning to deploy them unless there's a requirement for it, which currently doesn't exist.
Well, I have an interest in aerial assets because I'm the chairman of the subcommittee on Homeland Security, and we need to be able to do some aerial surveying. We got a lot of country to cover, and I was wondering, do you have enough knowledge of the program to know that whether you feel like you're getting effective results from this?
So we are getting
aerial?
effective results. As you may know, our assets were among the first on the ground in Japan after Fukushima. And I say on the ground when in fact they were aerial assets, but the ability of those assets to be deployed within hours, a day or so after that event took place, was a huge contribution to the ability to model what was going on in the atmosphere there and where things were going. But I think I would serve your question better for me to take that for the record and get back to you about that in consultation with our emergency response group that has the assets.
I like to know, because, when we really come down to it, a nuclear event where somebody smuggles a bomb into this country or materials for a dirty bomb, it's probably going to come from across the borders, and it's probably going to have to be, there's lots of borders and lots of sea borders and lots of areas that can come in, and we may get the tip,
right?
But will we be in the right spot? And that's where aerial has to come in.
So let me be clear. We have a very highly developed program of emergency response that is well tested and is regularly tested, and it is specifically staffed to be able to respond to emergencies in this country, and again regularly tested with those aerial assets we're talking about.
We'll visit.
Thank you.
About this. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Miller, you said you're committed to the MOCs. I say this carefully.
As will I.
Are you and Ms. Harrington also committed to controlling some of the costs associated with it? Can we talk about that for a few minutes? I don't think we can have a hearing here without having maybe a better understanding as to why the costs have risen. We charged the GAO with sort of taking a look at over your shoulder, and so could you, both of you sort of comment for the record as to where we stand here?
With regard to the causes of the cost
Yes,
increases?
primarily, yes.
Yes. I
To
think
take a
that-
few minutes and run us through where we are here.
So we are in the middle of the analysis of a baseline change proposal for that project. So for that purpose, because that has not been fully vetted through us yet, I'm reluctant to give you a number. There are a lot of numbers floating around out there, but I think it is very safe to say we're looking at a considerable cost increase.
So where are you sort of in the
Close
in
to
the process?
being complete.
You
Close
are.
to being complete.
Yeah. So-
And again, I believe that your staff has been briefed by the members of the department that, outside of the NNSA, that regularly review these baseline change proposals. So we are expecting a significant cost increase. With regard to what has caused this, not surprisingly, I wouldn't give you just one answer. I would say in broad categories, you could look to the, certainly the project management part of this. And that's one of the reasons why when I spoke to the committee the last time, I told you the emphasis that NNSA began placing on managing the project together with managing the contract and the need and the effect of doing so. But we have had project management challenges. I would point to the fact that over time, the technology development to do this project, which is to say to produce mixed oxide fuel from weapons-grade plutonium, which was new, really, although MOX itself was not new, that posed challenges that the people that we hired to do could only anticipate just how significant those challenges would be and what kind of technology development would be required. I think they did the best they could at the time with the information they had when they were asked to do the project. But because it was first of a kind, that effort, again, turning weapons-grade plutonium into MOX, I think that, they did the best they could. I would also point to the well-known problem of the nuclear industry in this country having degraded in terms of its capability, having gone 30 years or so without a new construction project where people are working toward the NQA1 standard for nuclear work.
It's pretty remarkable workforce.
Right.
Sometimes come out of the ranks of the admirals.
Right. But the supply chain, which is stretched across the country,
there's no room for error here. You've got to get it right the first time.
Absolutely,
right?
and it's been extremely challenging because people are, simply put, are out of practice and have had to take much longer than anybody would have anticipated to be able to do the things so that they would meet the standards that the facility itself requires. And as you know, it's a Nuclear Regulatory Commission regulated facility. So there are no exemptions here. It has to meet the standards. And that has been very challenging. And then finally, the fact that we have nuclear power projects finally going in this country has,
Thank God.
has in fact, on the other end of the supply chain, begun to siphon off skilled workers to those projects.
Yeah.
So all of this together has combined to be to have made the original estimates for what it would take to do this project no longer valid.
So when we talk about a re-baseline process,
Yeah.
is it going to morph into another? I mean, is this still going to, we're going to have a contract here, or is it, quote, things are subject to change here, or even after all of this?
I think the people who are doing that baselining are doing the best they can to come up with the bounds of what that is likely to take. And I would be myself very careful to sign up and swear to a number, knowing that the variables that I've just discussed and others will continue to play into this project.
All the things we have to do on this committee, given limited funds.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is, that's sort of why we're here.
Including the fact
We
that
don't
you
want this
build.
to suck up everything here.
Right, and you
A
build
lot of things we need to
right.
do, cleanups and this and that.
Right.
That's right, that's right, this is a very expensive project.
Ms. Capter?
Yes, I have my final question for Admiral Richardson, just in terms of our nuclear submarine capability. If you were on a scale of however you want to describe it, how great an advantage does the United States have over any other country in the world based on our current force?
I think that, ma'am, to answer your question, we currently enjoy a dominance in the undersea domain. And it is the Navy's intent, and the CNO has been very clear on this, that we will watch our potential adversaries very closely to make sure that we maintain that dominance. It's that dominance is a national treasure, an asymmetric advantage. Having said that, other nations are continuing to develop, and their navies are continuing to develop, including their undersea forces. And so it is something that we continually have to guard and treasure. It's nothing that we can take for granted at all. And it is, if that scale should tip, that would be a loss of a significant advantage that the United States
Are we
enjoys.
twice? Are we 10 times? Are we 3 times?
Very hard to sort of describe it in that way. I would say that we have a clear advantage right now, but there are people who recognize that advantage and are making every advancement they can to challenge it.
If the gentlewoman would deal,
I'd be
the
pleased to yield.
open sources obviously point to some pretty remarkable goals that the Chinese have
Right.
in terms of their submarine fleet. I mean,
Yes, sir. And the Russians have also
Yeah, I mean,
have some
I
active
mean, it's
programs
pretty
going
amazing
on,
what's
so-
out there.
Right.
And some of them are diesel and some are, right, nuclear. I'm not sure what the mix is, but
There's
tell.
there's a full mix from just solely diesel to air-independent types of vehicles to nuclear submarines, and both the Chinese and the Russians are, even in open press,
they-
have made significant advancements.
And we're obviously supportive of
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
of you, but it's difficult for us to get many subs out the door. I mean, given what we've been through here lately.
Yes, sir. Well, all of that is, again, a vulnerable part, very vulnerable in light of sequestration. And so just as we're getting to 2 per year Virginia-class submarines, then, this is puts all of that in grave jeopardy.
Yeah, including obviously, we have a very valuable industrial base all along the line here.
Very fragile.
Lot of big guys as well as smaller people that are hanging on by their,
Yes, sir.
excuse me for taking your time.
Congressman Visklowski, highlighted the vulnerability of that industrial base, whereas 90% is sole source. And they're relying on this, business plan being executed. That's how they've managed their workforce, their material, and their subcontractors, sub-tier contractors.
Well, in any race, you need to know what the handicaps are, so I was very interested in your assessment of what the field looks like right now.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, if you allow me to also circle back to your earlier question about the life cycle and what we can do 50 years hence. If you do take a life cycle approach, another thing we can do to minimize the amount of fuel at the end of the cycle is to minimize the amount of fuel going into the beginning of the cycle. And so one approach we've taken is, if you go back to the beginning of the program, we were basically refueling a reactor core every 2 years. At the end of 2 years, that would be a spent core. By virtue of the research that's been done since that time, the Ohio replacement reactor core will last 40 years. And so, a times 20 reduction in the eventual spent fuel that we'll have to manage at the other end of that cycle.
Thank you. Thank you all very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Capter. Just give you a pat on the back. The Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation programs have historically carried larger unspent balances from year to year, and I think you provided us with some reports on those balances and progress in reducing them. God only knows where that plays into the overall budget scenario here, but here you are, let's say, coming aboard and providing us with the information at a very time when we're making some pretty significant decisions, so we're appreciative of that effort.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I could just
Mr.
ask
Simpson.
Administrator, assuming sequestration takes effect Friday, and I think most of us think it's going to happen. We don't know how long it's going to go or what the heck's going to happen with it. How much flexibility do you have within your budgets to address this? Not suggesting that flexibility would relieve all the problems of sequestration, but how much flexibility do you have, and would it be helpful, as long as it's going to take effect, to at least be able to switch from highest priority functions to lowest priority functions and to prioritize? How much do you have?
So, Mr. Simpson, the answer to that is this. Under the rules of sequestration, of course, I have no flexibility. So sequestration in and of itself, as you know, is hitting program and project all the way down. 7.7% for us. I have no flexibility.
That's what it is, 7.7%?
7.7, almost 8%.
Yep.
All the way down the line. So unfortunately, many people, as you know, believe this is a haircut off the top.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not that.
Yep.
For the weapons activities account, which funds defense programs and several other things, but does not fund either naval reactors or nuclear nonproliferation. For the weapons activities account, under the current continuing resolution, I have reprogramming authority. If I were to I have an anomaly first of all, that has me operating at the President's proposed 2013 budget, and within that, I have flexibility to reprogram. If I have a similar anomaly for the follow-on continuing resolution, I will be able, with flexibility and an anomaly, I will be able to do some movement of money with the committee's agreement on a reprogramming basis. However, I don't have any such authority for these programs right now of my colleagues sitting on either side of me.
Yeah.
So that is why we want to be very, very clear that reprogramming authority, any reprogramming authority, gives us some relief, but nothing on the scale of what we'll need to fix this.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Just for the record, your goal is to secure vulnerable materials overseas in 4 years. Is that still achievable?
Yes, we believe so.
Given under, given the Budget Control Act and sequester, or is that going to change too? Of course, we don't have the benefit of the administration's budget, so of course that's another factor there. But
Right.
but relative to the BCA and sequester.
Well, currently, in the 4-year effort on highly enriched uranium, we're at 3,520 of our target of 4,353 kilos. So we're roughly 3/4 of the way through. We have several countries that will de-inventory this year: the Czech Republic, where the whole 4-year effort began, Vietnam. So we have other shipments that are due this year. We are optimistic that we can still stay on schedule, because much of this work, as you would expect, has a long lead time. So it's not like we're starting. It's not like we're starting it tomorrow.
Yeah.
But certainly other parts of our efforts would look at having to slip forward into the future.
Yeah. Well, this is a goal we need to achieve.
Yes.
Sooner rather than later. Anything else for the, well, thank you very much, everybody,
Thank you.
for
Thank you
being
very
with us. Oh, Mr. Simpson wants.
You do have reprogramming authority for nonproliferation and naval reactors, is that right?
Under the CR, we don't.
No.
We do not have.
I think you do.
You do.
Okay.
Rob says we do.
We do.
Well, if
Oh, we
he says
do?
we do, we do.
Okay. But reprogramming is not the same as you're having flexibility to move money around to some degree. I mean, with reprogramming, you have to have the approval of the subcommittees, and sometimes that's not as easy as you think.
Correct. I do have, I have ability to move some money around, but the degree, what I was really speaking to is the degree to which I would need money to assure that my programs were taken care of. I don't have that.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah, the Secretary of Energy actually has some extraordinary powers
That's
relative to
correct.
national security, which I think override a lot of.
And this I mentioned, I
Yeah.
think, when I was up here the last time.
Yeah.
I do have, if I declare it for national security purposes, I actually don't, I think the administrator has the authority to do it. We have, I think it's up to 5% can be moved among the 4 accounts that I have. But that too, as I recall, will require a notification here.
All right.
Okay?
Okay, well, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much for the responses, your participation.
Hi, good to see you. Nice to see you, Warren. Thank you.
I need to say goodbye to him. Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
How are you?
I agree. Handshaking. Yeah. It's like all the extra stuff that we captive
all the way around.
Where's she from? Hey, kid. Have fun?
Oh. It's interesting having a bunch of here.
Oh, yeah. Yep, see if you hop on the one.
Got the death grip.
Good luck.
No evidence. Good to see you. You usually cover us. Not here.
Yeah, well, it's, I figured Knox was going to come. It did.
Although in one of the least interesting ways, we've been from
Yeah.
sort of a routine.
Right, nothing too surprising. I knew that Alexander sent out that letter about each, and I figured he was going to be a little tough, but...
You sort of asked the question on the left.
He had it written down. But I wanted to ask either Neil or Ann, just for a minute on the status of the things. Yeah, it looks, from what I saw online, it's going to be
Yeah, I'm not sure, but they, Ann might know. If not, I can give you
Okay.
separately. I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, once she gets done.